What up, everybody? At the end of Raising Kanan Season 1, Marvin got picked up at a traffic stop because he had a warrant for his arrest after he got snitched on by Tony Deep. Tony Deep skipped town and didn't show up to court, but Marvin still had to go to anger management class because he was arrested with weed in his pocket. At anger management, Marvin met his counselor, Renee, who explained to Marvin that he was openly aggressive, something that we definitely saw play out in Season 1, how he dealt with Tony Deep, tried threatening Symphony, and got into a fight outside of Lane's nightclub, amongst other things. Marvin wasn't given any effort in class, and even almost got into a fight in the class with a man named Gerald. Eventually, Renee had to pull Marvin off to the side and tell him if he didn't start participating in class, that she would have to report him to the court. But it was also around this time that Marvin actually tried using the breathing tactic that he learned in the class when Demo started cussing him out at the elevator. And Marvin was able to keep a cool head, help Demo out, who eventually saved Marvin's life at the end of Season 2. So Marvin began to change, graduated his anger management class, and even became friends with Gerald, the same guy he almost got into a fight with. It was at this time Renee gave Marvin her number so he could take her out sometime. But Marvin went looking for Miss Renee at the worst possible time while he was being hunted by the Italian Mafia, and they shot at Marvin and missed but hit Renee instead, resulting in her death. Then at the end of Season 2, Howard and Rock found out that a crackhead named Sam knew that Kanan was the one who shot Howard at the park and that he was running his mouth down at the precinct. And Rock assigned Marvin to get rid of Sam. But Marvin didn't have it in him to kill Sam at first, but instead sent him on a bus to Atlanta with a bankroll of cash. But Sam immediately stopped the bus and was staying at the nicest crack spot in Queens because of the bankroll that Marvin gave him. So Marvin showed up to the crack spot and smoked Sam with a tear in his eye before the cops were able to get to him first and get a statement. And keep in mind that this hit extra close to home for Marvin because he was also at one point a drug addict before getting arrested, serving his sentence, and getting cleaned up. Getting us to Season 3, and Marvin was at the bar with Lou when he got a call from his friend Gerald to come rescue him. And he had to pay two men what I think was around $500 to pay off Gerald's drug debt. From that point, the two continued to connect when Marvin found out that Gerald worked at the newspaper and Gerald was going to do an article on Jukebox and her singing career. Then in episode 7, as Marvin showed up at Gerald's house, only to find his two daughters outside waiting in the car in the cold. When Marvin got the girls out and knocked on Gerald's door, he discovered that Gerald was inside using heroin while the girls were outside waiting in the cold. So Marvin knew that Gerald was a junkie already, but now he knows that Gerald is still using. I also noticed two specific things when Marvin was in Gerald's house cleaning up. First off, that he called Gerald G, just like Kanan and Tommy both called a ghost G. And second, that Gerald's daughters are now calling Marvin Uncle Marvin. So this shows that Marvin and Gerald are getting close. We also learned that Gerald's wife was also a junkie and ended up running off and leaving Gerald to raise his girls by himself. And keep in mind that Kenya also ran off to leave Marvin to raise Jukebox by himself. So most likely when Jukebox was around the same age as Gerald's daughters was when Marvin was getting high before he had to do his bid. And I also assumed that Marvin was using powder, but now I don't know. He might have been on something heavier like crack or heroin. But when Marvin told Gerald that he had to kick, Gerald told Marvin that he doesn't know if he can get better on his own. And Marvin said something very key to keep in mind as I proceed with this video. You're not doing it on your own. I'm here. Now, while all this is going on, Marvin and Rock are currently arranging to set up shop to move heroin out of 20 different Chinese restaurants throughout Queens and Brooklyn, making them one of the biggest street-level suppliers of heroin in the whole city. So with that said, the chances of Gerald relapsing over staying clean and never using again are pretty good and likely. So most likely Gerald will get word that there's some new good dope out there being sold out of these Chinese restaurants. So then Gerald will show up at one of the Chinese restaurants to cop and bump into none other than Marvin Thomas. And at that point, Marvin will definitely know what Gerald is up to and will most likely have to come clean in one way or another that he's a drug dealer. Or Gerald could probably just put two and two together also. I mean, he did know that Marvin would have that $500 to pay off his debt with no problem. And Marvin's always talking about work, but you never actually see him working or have no idea what he actually does. So it's not that hard to figure out. Plus, Gerald being a news reporter could probably easily access a background check on Marvin if he actually wanted to. So then after this, and we could also potentially see Gerald overdose. But I think one way or another, Marvin will have a complete change of heart. And seeing firsthand the results of the drugs he's done, he will decide to get out the game. Keep in mind that just last episode, in episode 7, Marvin told the Chinese people that once they get in the game, there was no getting out. This could be a clue that Marvin will be the next character to have a change of heart and want out the game. Up to this point, we have no reason to believe that Marvin would even want out the game at all, because he's had a mindset a lot more like Tommy Egan than of Ghost. I think it was season 1 when Rock had Marvin getting ready the project so she could set up shop. He got frustrated one day, sick of doing construction work on the apartment, and he told her that he's a gangster and that he does gangster. Then also keep in mind in season 1, Marvin told Kanan that he'd been hustling since he was like 12 years old or real young, something like that. So Marvin's been hustling, selling drugs all his life. It's legit all he knows. But I still think when he sees Gerald at that Chinese shop getting his dope, it's going to upset Marvin to the point that he decides to get out the game and come to the same revelation as James St. Patrick. I don't know any old retired drug dealers. Either though in Raising Kanan we do see some old retired drug dealers, Snaps and Pop Henry, but the key word is that they are retired. At some point they had enough sense to get out the game. Either though getting back in the game and working with Kanan and Ronnie might seal their fate eventually also. But even if Marvin does decide to walk away from the game, will it be just that easy? So far it hasn't been for any power character who wanted out the game. Ghost spent 6 seasons fighting to get out the game. And we know from Tommy's words, basically his whole life, everything he did was designed to ultimately leave the game. Rock legitimately was out the game at the beginning of season 3, but when things weren't going that good at being the landlord, and after being rejected by Luda, she decided to get back in the game. Only to be told by Stefano, now that you're back in, there's only one way out. Then add the fact that Marvin killed Mafia boss Sal Baselli, and Stefano's playing it nice for the time being, but he could hold that over his head at any time. Then you also add the fact that Marvin is the center of a federal investigation, and Marvin might want out the game, but it might not be just that easy. And there you have it. Will Marvin get out the game? Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.